Okay.
Maggie, does it look like you've got some responses in your Padlet?
Yeah, there's for area 1 and 2. Yeah, there's a lot of them for area 1.
Okay, do we want to go ahead and get started then? And people can continue to fill that out while we kind of take care of housekeeping and introductions?
Sure.
So just a reminder, while you're filling out the Padlet, go ahead and change your Zoom name if you haven't already, so we can make sure everybody gets into the breakout rooms quickly and efficiently. If you need help with that, you can send any one of us a message and we are glad to help you with that. Make sure I drop the link to the sign in and also the link to the slides. All resources are archived on our Learning Standards webpage, including the recordings from these sessions. So we will, you have access to all of that this summer, and whenever you might need it. We are gearing up for the next round of the Capacity Builder professional development for the priority learning standards for next year. And we'll have more information coming out by email. Okay, next. PD credits. So everyone that has registered for any of our sessions through April should have received an email from me with the PD credit PDF attached. Please send me a message if you did not receive that and still need that. You have to complete the registration link to receive the form. We have gotten the agreement in place with ROE 35 to get payment to you all. Chris Dvorak and I will be working together to send a message out, hopefully this week, on how you can submit, how your ROE office can submit for receiving those funds. You will have until the end of June to complete activities to get the funds. You can also backdate activities through our first session in mid-January. So we can cover anything from January through the end of June. So we'll be watching for your email. We'll send it out across IARSS as well to all of the superintendents. So I'll turn it back to Maggie to, is that what we're doing next? To handle the Padlet?
Yeah, we were just having that up so people could enter that and then just kind of look at it, do a little gallery view of how
Is
people
everybody, are you getting responses?
Yes, in areas 1 and 2, we have a lot of responses. If people have it up, they can see all the responses in their own.
Okay, so if you're from area 3, 4, 5, or 6 and have not responded to our prompt, which was how are you using the resources, please go ahead and do so. Okay, are there any questions about the PD credits or the funding? If you think of some, you are welcome to email me or drop a message in here. I'll be here until 10:30 when I have to go to board prep meeting. Is there anything else I needed to address, everyone?
I just want to say thank you, Erica. It's really great to have had these meetings, and I know Maggie and Katie and so many others have been instrumental in having those, but thank you. And thank you so much for the funding and seeing that to fruition. That's just really awesome. So thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, April. I'm glad we were able to make this work, and Maggie and Katie and Dara and Angie have really been instrumental in us making this happen. Their expertise has been very much appreciated. for next year, we are going to be doing a similar format to continue with the priority learning standards. So we'll move past the introduction phase of just making sure everybody knows what they are to really digging in and figuring out how do you work with the priority standards, how do you use that within your curriculum and also assessment. So we're looking forward to that next year, and hopefully all of you will join us again. We'll pick up with those in July. So we're starting to plan. And then we will also be doing a series. We have developed a curriculum evaluation tool for all curricular areas. So we'll be doing a series on that next year as well. We're very appreciative to have you all as partners.
So just to kind of kick off for our session today is that we really learned a lot after our last session. Just about we had great positive response after last session of actually like digging into the standards and talking about them and kind of taking a couple steps back. So that's kind of what we're going to do again today is we're going to talk a little bit more about the role of the capacity builder, as well as share with you some organizational resources that we think would be really beneficial as you continue through your role as the capacity builder. We're going to break out into breakout groups so that we can do a little bit more of that deeper dive into the specific group that you're in. So we're not going to be going into breakout groups today based off of your area. We're really going to be doing it based off of where are you at in terms of supporting districts, and there's no right or wrong answer. But that way we can really help tailor the specific dialogue to what you're doing, not just as an area, what's everyone doing. So we're really looking forward to that. And we'll come back and kind of regroup. Dara will take us kind of do an overview of where everybody was at. And then Angie will take over and go over some plans and agendas for some ideas for summer learning, as well as we talked about doing kind of the breadcrumbs, where we put together all of the pieces, linking together the IAR evidence tables, the priority learning standards, and some of the analysis reports. And that'll kind of conclude our day today. So one of the things that we've heard is that we've provided a ton of really great resources, but it's been really hard to kind of manage when to use them, where are they all kept? Like it's been a little bit overwhelming is what we've heard. So what we did was we went ahead and made a resource index that if you click on the link, which is in the slide deck that you have, it'll force you to make a copy. So we've taken all of the resources that we've provided you today and organize them into different categories. So when we're thinking about where are we at in terms of helping support our districts with the priority learning standards, possibly we're at the assessing needs, right? Our districts have been very overwhelmed. We're going to start getting our feet wet to see what type of work they might want with us this summer. This could be the category that you would go to if you're thinking priority learning standards, I need to assess the needs of my districts. So here's the names of all of the resources that we've provided you. Here's the purpose and kind of when would I use this particular resource. And then what we've done is streamlined it so that each of these is linked to a forced copy for you. Okay, so that would be kind of the category you would go to if you would need to be assessing the needs. We're continuing to add resources and continuing to kind of grow your toolbox. So this is going to be a live document that we'll continue to update. So that way you're not having to go to the website and remember which session, the ISB website, and remember which session you attended to know where the resource came from. This will be your one-stop shop for all of our resources. Then we have the role of the capacity builder. And in a little bit here, Maggie's going to talk about, because we've added a few more roles to help provide clarity about what our role of a capacity builder actually is. But again, it's set up the same way where we have the name of the resource, the purpose, when to use it, and then a forced copy of the document. Okay. Our final kind of category here was resources for when you're working with the district. So you know what your role is, you have clarity over your role of the capacity builder. You've assessed your needs. Now it's time for you to go work with the district. So we've broken this up into maybe you're working with the district on their assessments. So here's the resources, the purpose, when to use it, and to make a copy. Perhaps before you can work with your district, maybe your teachers need to have clarity over what are these priority learning standards and how can we utilize them. So we've broken up some resources that focus on teacher clarity that you can utilize. Again, some supports that you can do with vertical articulation. Some of the resources that ISB had provided, including that crosswalk that many people had been looking forward to. So we have included the copy of that. And then Angie had provided at the end of last session, things got a little bit rushed, but some really great ideas on what you can do this summer to help support your district. So we've linked those, as well as some work that you might be able to do with your districts during their PLC, some PLC work. So our goal for this was to really streamline all of those resources that you've been given. If you are a capacity builder, this can be your one-stop shop to go back and kind of re-trigger. Oh, good, I see people are appreciative of this. That's awesome, because I know that I was getting really overwhelmed. My Google folder that I have for the Priority Learning Standards was looking a hot mess. And so this is a really great thing that we can just save this one document and have a link to all of them. But Maggie's going to go ahead and talk a little bit further on a couple of the new resources that we've added for you here. So Maggie?
Hey, can you bring up the second one under ROE Capacity Builder? And we created this ROE Capacity Builder, how you can reach out to a variety of stakeholders, because the feedback we were getting was that superintendents were getting the message, but it was not getting to the schools and it was not getting to the teachers. And so we created a document where you have your stakeholder groups, you have superintendents, your district curriculum directors, school principals and assistant principals, instructional coaches and teachers, and just some suggestions. And I'm sure you have many of your own because each ROE and ISC is a little bit different in what they call their groups and who they can reach out to. But what we suggested is that the avenues for context be many, ROEs and counties have networks or collaboratives for specific groups. So ask to be put on the agenda at one of their meetings and make just a brief presentation on IPLS and services available. And in a minute, we'll show you an example of a brief presentation that you might be able to use. For superintendents, it would be contacting their organization through your regional superintendent.
Started at 10, but she didn't send out the invite. So I emailed her.
With district curriculum directors, we have, like in our county, we have DCCD, which is District Curriculum Coordinators of DuPage. Contact the curriculum coordinators or directors in your county if you have some kind of a network or contact group. They would be a good resource to ask to be on their program. I know ours meet, I think, about 6 or 8 times a year. School principals and assistant principals, we have collaboratives for each of those in our county. So if you have anything where you have some kind of a network or collaborative for your principals or assistant principals, we contacted them as well and gave them information about our workshops that we were presenting for IPLS. And then with instructional coaches, we also have an instructional coach network that we use, and we have probably about 100 people on that network. So it's a good resource for us to get information out. As well as then teachers, one way you can get to them if you don't have direct contact with them is to offer some introductory workshops and webinars through your ROE or ISC. I know we offered 9 workshops, 3 in science, 3 in math, and 3 in ELA. And we had over 240 people that attended. Some of them I'm sure were duplicates, but we had 240 registrants for those workshops. So there'll be good people that we can then go back to and say, okay, now what do you need? And on the bottom of this is the organizations that you might, contact, give you some ideas that you might let them know. We have some services for the IPLS. And right now, we're going to go to that IPLS overview presentation. And if you are meeting with any of them, do you have that? Can you bring that up, Katie? And so that is right under capacity builders role. It's the 3rd one. Yeah. So let's say they say, okay, we can give you 10 or 15 minutes, in our program. So here's some of the things you can do. You can modify this, you can add your own flavor to it, but we thought maybe have an FAQ with them, prepare a list of frequently asked questions. Some of the ones that we covered here, like, are they mandated? Do they have IPLS for all subjects? What do we do if our district schools already have priority standards? Another frequently asked question is this only good for this year, or is it going to go on into next year and beyond? So again, some of those myths and facts that there are out there. Talk about the difference, and this is really a critical one. And if I was going to give one message to any of these groups, if they were only giving me 5 minutes, I would do number 2, talk about the difference between identifying IPLS or priority learning standards and implementing them, because implementing goes a lot deeper. A lot of districts, as we talked about earlier, have priority learning standards or are using IPLS, but they really have only identified them. And then teachers are kind of on their own on how they implement them. A third thing you could do is have them use the Likert scale. We gave you last time, that was the self-assessment, where they can utilize that with anybody in their district to self-assess where they are, what their strengths and what their opportunities for growth might be. And it's a 15 item self-assessment. So if you're limited on time, ask them just to do the first 5, say, or do the first 3. Just so they get some interaction with it and start to see, oh, it does go a little bit deeper than just identifying. And then you can use the options for implementing. Could you pull that one up, Katie? And there's 2 that we gave you in different formats. Either one is fine to use. And I think that's under the needs assessments section. So we had lots of red arrows. You remember the red arrow document that showed what were some of their options for implementing. Again, that's a good document to give them. The other one was in a little curved yes and no kind of answer. Yet if you answer yes, you go over here. So both of those are, or either one would be good to use. Okay. And then the last thing I would do is make participants aware of any IPLS related workshops you're offering in your ROE or ISC. I know April in Jordan, in her area, she offered, and she really widely publicized that, and it was very successful. April, do you know how many people you had that went through that?
Hi, Maggie. Yeah, we had 60 or 61 people.
Great. And who was your presenter again?
We had Larry Ainsworth.
Yes, Larry Ainsworth. Yeah, so that's fabulous. And he did a series. So it was really, they really went deep, and that was great. So make people aware of that. We made all of our groups aware of the 9 workshops that we were doing with IPLS, and we're really pleased with the turnout that we had for that as well. The last thing on the index that we're going to show you is, it's the first one under resources, Katie. Right. And so that's an example of a district. Oh, no, that's not. I'm sorry, I sent you to the wrong one. Under teacher clarity, maybe. Yeah. Yep. So this is an example a district used. It's a model designed by Fisher and Fry, and this is how they went through teacher clarity and what it looked like. And so you can, provide for them if you want an example of here's what we can do with you. And there's lots and lots of other ones to select from in this index of resources for you. So we hope that we can get beyond the superintendent level as capacity builders and get out there into the districts, working with the teachers, working with the principals, working with the curriculum coordinators. And I know we looked at the roles of people who were coming to our IPLS workshops, And a lot of them were district curriculum directors or curriculum coordinators that were planning on using these with their staff during the summer, because teachers were not always available, during the day when we were presenting the IPLS workshops. So that's kind of some of the ways that you can use this. Hopefully it will be helpful to you, and appreciate your time in listening. And now are we going to I think the breakout rooms? Yeah.
Yes. So as Katie pointed out, that we want to give everyone an opportunity to kind of meet with some other PD coordinators and do some networking. And we want this networking to be valuable. So we're asking that you participate in networking based off of where you are in this process of sharing the Illinois Priority Learning Standards with others. So if you currently are just attending these monthly webinars and meetings to increase your knowledge, please select room 1. If you are just focusing on what it is to be a capacity builder and how best you can use the information you're learning as a capacity builder, choose room 2. If you've administered the needs assessment to your area school districts, please choose room 3. And if you are currently providing professional learning to districts and schools or teachers, please select room 4. One of us from the design team will be in each of the rooms to help facilitate this discussion. In addition, there are slides that each room would, for each room to capture the notes from their discussion. Any questions? Okay, I believe that Katie has the rooms set up. So if you will go to the room, or is that what we want to do, Katie, is allow them to choose the room?
Yep, you can go ahead and select which room you think would best fit you based off of the slides that we're showing. And you can go ahead and go to that room and start collaborating. If you need help and you'd like me to assign you to a room, just unmute yourself and I can help support that.
And then Katie, which room are you going to go to?
I'm in room 2 is what we had said.
Okay, what room am I supposed to be in?
I don't remember.
Okay, that's all right. I thought I was
Laura's in 1 and Angie's in 4. So why don't you go to 2 and I'll go to 3? Because no one
to go to 2.
No one's in 3 yet. So if you can go to 2.
Okay.
Okay.
Hi, Katie.
Hey.
What are they up to right now?
Yep. So can you see my screen with the networking?
Yeah.
So when you think about where you're at and kind of what you're needing, you're going to the breakout room based off of where your Lake County currently is. So if your capacity right now is that you are attending these meetings and that's where you're at, you're just coming to these monthly meetings, you go to room 1. If you're trying to understand what your role is of the capacity builder, you go to room 2. If you're currently administering the needs assessment, you do 3, or if you're already providing or you're ready to provide professional learning, you go to room 4.
Okay. Quick question too.
Yep.
Is Isby joining us today?
Who?
Isby?
They are on. Yes, we've got Erica and
We're
Angela
here.
already on.
Oh, hi. Did you guys go through anything like IAR related or ELA related
Maggie,
already?
do you need me to put you in room 1?
Yeah, I was looking because room 3 doesn't seem to have anybody.
No, why don't you go to room 2?
All right.
Thanks.
I don't see where it says join though.
No,
Here,
Nicole.
I can put you in there.
All right.
There you go. Perfect.
Is Shay on?
Shay was on, Nicole. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you guys. I just
Oh,
wanted to
that's
get
okay.
her off to her place. Shay went to room 2, just letting you know.
That's okay.
Okay.
And then did you have a link for today's presentation stuff?
Yeah. And then was Angelique able to answer your question?
Maggie came in, so.
Sorry, you can go ahead.
Okay, well, let me just bounce into the rooms and then I'll take a look at this
Do you want
presentation.
to ask Angelique really quick though?
I don't have a specific question. I know that last time we were trying to get them on, and so I didn't know if they were
Yeah, we
coming.
didn't get the assessment group.
Okay.
Like they kept saying no, so we basically are just asking them the questions instead of continuing to invite them.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Hi, Katie. Can you put me in room 2, please? This is Cheryl Graff.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
You said room 2, right, Cheryl?
Yes.
Okay. Angelique, do you remember what time we started the breakouts? Because I forgot to look.
It's 10:28.
Okay,
It's 10:30 right now, and you just finished, so it's
like around
10:28.
37-ish.
Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want me to set a timer, Katie?
Okay, so welcome back. We're back from the breakout rooms, and these interactive slides provided a way to capture the discussion in each of the rooms. And there was 4 rooms, so we'll just ask each room to report out. These are the notes from room 1. I was the note catcher. Is there anyone from room 1 that wants to kind of give a oral comment regarding what we talked about or the notes? Anyone? So I will just say that two big things that came out of our room was ROEs in regards to professional development often work in a team focus. And so some of the people in our room were in this room 1 because they're part of a team, and they're relying on other members of the team to be more active in this role. Yet we all agree that attending these webinars and really focusing on equal interpretation of the priority standards and using the same language and discussing them is a must. So even as a member of a team, and we all are aware of our role within that team, but understand the need for consistency in language and use of them. And I think that it's really important to know that when schools are ready, we need to be ready. And so that to be constantly involved in these trainings, as well as building ourselves up as capacity builders, is so important. I just want to reiterate, many people still continue to comment on the meeting priority prior to this one being extremely useful. And there was a question regarding some of the work that the other areas are doing, like with Larry Ainsworth and that April had. Was there recordings of those meetings that can be shared throughout? Is a question.
Unfortunately, no, we did not record the sessions.
Okay, thank you, April.
We recorded the 9 sessions that we did in DuPage, but people had to register and pay $15. And then they would get the recording if they couldn't attend. So.
Very good, thank you. What about room 2?
Okay, room 2, we didn't put any notes down. We were so involved in the discussion, and it was very lively and really good. So I'm going to ask, April had a point she was making at the very end, and she has some really, I think, some nuggets of wisdom from Larry Ainsworth. So April, the point that you were making when we got cut off, if you could kind of talk about that.
Sure. No problem, Maggie. And I just refreshed, or if you refresh, I just started to add some notes for the group. It's a team effort, but really the pivotal question, our group was understanding my role of capacity builders. And we said, well, what do we, what should a district focus on in terms of standards? And then we started to discuss, well, it comes down to really a district's values, right? Are you valuing just the student learning and aligning the standards for your district? Is that the value right now, or is the value on students performing well on the IAR? Because then you might shift the attention, and Shay, jump in here too on what standards you're going to focus on, because they're assessed more often on the IAR. So that might be a conversation. And for example, if we have schools that are designated schools from the past, of course, carrying over, doing well on the IAR might be really important, right? We can't fault them for that. There's nothing wrong with that. And then I was about to share in determining what standards should be, let's say, a priority standard. Larry Ainsworth was helping us look to these kind of 4 gears that spin together. And he talked about, again, sorry, I didn't update this, but he talked about readiness. And so I'm going to put this on here. If you refresh our slide, you'll see that readiness for learning, and that's next level learning, meaning the next grade level. So that might be imperative. The next thing was endurance, and that was, of course, students remembering concepts over time. And the third was leverage, and that was interdisciplinary connectedness among the standards. And then the last was external exams, which would be national, state, college, career readiness exams, but readiness, endurance, and leverage should help focus your group to identify their priority standards if they're looking at creating their own local standards, priority standards, or just sort of digesting the ones the state put forth.
Thanks, April. And Laura, did you want to mention your question or dilemma about the writing process that we talked about?
Yeah, one of the things that in working with the districts in April, these are outside of our areas. I didn't want you to think I'm just kind of like, meandering in and out. No, that's not what I'm doing. One of the things that I'm finding when people are trying to prioritize the writing standards is to look at them in two different senses. Looking at it from the framework of the writing process and the three types of writing that the standards share, but then also looking at them from what does it mean to be an on-demand writer. So there are times when both of those types of writing are important to understand and know. And then how do we develop standards to help people understand both of those types of writing? On demand might be something that the students would see within the assessment, as Maggie mentioned. And then the other piece is actually teaching the children through, if it's writer's workshop or whatever methodology that they're using. And the other piece is, and then as Maggie mentioned before, is the blending of what can we capitalize on in our L or our I that help to support that writing process. So when a student might be reading and then how they're doing reader's response, where the teacher may say, you've just read these two articles, you're going to compare and contrast, then you're developing that on-demand type, but also depending on reading comprehension. So this is where I think that a lot of the higher level dilemma that people have when they're trying to figure out how to prioritize looking at the writing standards. They become, everybody thinks every one of them is important. However, when you go back to Larry Ainsworth's model of readiness and endurance and leverage, those three areas really do help to solidify that, I think, a little bit more for people.
Very good. Thank you.
Thanks. Wonderfully said. That was our discussion in room 2.
Very good. What about room 3?
There was nobody in room 3, Dara.
Oh, okay, good. So I'm guessing room 4 with Angie was full.
So I took the notes for our group, but if there's someone from our room that would like to kind of share the highlights, I would invite you to do so. Okay, I've used appropriate Zoom wait time, so I will volunteer someone. How about Nicole? Nicole, can you unmute and kind of share your thoughts from our discussion?
Sure. I came in a little late to the room, so I hope I can kind of summarize it. But we have districts and areas who have been working with specific districts on either helping them be supported with prioritizing some standards. We've also had people work on going through different assessments and making sure that the questioning was correct or that it was rigorous enough or meeting those specific standards. So looking at kind of a full-blown approach to this, not just identifying it, but actually putting in some work so that they know that they're meeting it. I know that there are people working on maybe just doing some webinars or some shorter PDs for districts in the area to say, like, this is how we can support you, this is how we can help you, or this is what this process looks like. But it seemed like we were being pretty successful with a variety of districts and that they were all at a variety of different levels as well. Did I sum it up, Angie?
That's perfect. You know,
Okay.
it was really neat to see that some of us were just kind of starting with some of those initial conversations and overviews, and then others were digging into conversations such as learning trajectories and standards-based systems. So it was really exciting to hear and share. And we had some questions identified, which we didn't wholeheartedly get around to answering because we ran out of time.
Very good. So with that said, Thank you for all participating in the breakout rooms. We're going to turn this over to Angie Garza.
All right, everybody. I have just a few things. Hopefully you can thumbs up if you can see my screen with the slides. Okay, thank you for that feedback. I appreciate it. So I wanted to just very quickly, before we get into our conversations about breadcrumbs, I wanted to share a few of the resources on that Excel document or that table that Katie and Maggie shared a little bit earlier with us. These were informational pieces that we had included last time, but ran a little bit short. So just to kind of highlight some of these items, first of all, linked here as well as in that document are some sample kinds of plans for perhaps how you might think about organizing or rolling this out in a kind of a workshop fashion. And so there are actual links to the plans as well as opportunities to make forced copies so that you can kind of alter. And so I gave you just an example of what a hybrid delivery format might look like versus a completely synchronous learning in response to some of our work with the priority learning standards. And so this is something that that we are actually doing at our office. We developed both plans, but decided to go in the interest of all of the offerings that we're having for this summer to use the hybrid. So we're leveraging Zoom and Google Classroom to start folks on their way with looking at 21 and 22. And in fact, if you check out our website, we've actually divided these into level 1 and level 2. So I thought I'd give you an example if you're trying to kind of think about, gosh, what could this look like? I'm sure all of you have great examples that you're also using yourselves. So we would encourage you to share that with one another. I also want to share, this was on our agenda for last time. There are a couple of PLC. One of the things that came out of our discussion just a few minutes ago with our group was the fact that multi-tiered systems of support and professional learning communities are really getting a great deal of attention both this year and moving into next school year. So how do we leverage that need to incorporate conversations about the Illinois Priority Learning Standards? And so I included here, as well as on your other resource document, 2 templates that kind of focus some of our learning on those priority learning standards. One is using the DeFore model, and the other is using a slightly different way of contextualizing the the questions that drive our professional learning communities. So these are here for you to kind of take a look at and use or alter at your leisure. I think PLCs are going to be really important moving into next year and that job embedded professional learning, because I don't think that we will have a lot of opportunities to necessarily pull our teachers out of the classroom due to them wanting to be in the classroom, as well as our teacher shortage. So if we can kind of capitalize on some of those PLC conversations, I think it would go a long way. And then finally, this was another piece that I briefly mentioned the last time we were together on Zoom, and that is the conversations that we can still leverage before the end of the school year. I use this actually with a district who is closing out their school year. They have a great deal of teacher turnover, and so we had them, we started off with kind of talking about assessment, but here's the meat of it. Having teachers record those priority standards that they have identified in their course, providing some reflection, kind of thinking about where they ended with their scope and sequence, giving some holistic feedback on student learning and overall student challenges. And then once they shared this document, then the receiving teacher can take that information and have some planning reflections. So we've encouraged teachers to sit down together between grade levels and have these conversations. But at the very least, they can be collected and shared with next year's teachers so that they can start thinking about their students and where they might need to start next year. So purely reflection. So I'm gonna go ahead and stop sharing my screen right now before we dig into our breadcrumbs conversations. Anyone else have plans or documents that they have used to kind of close out the school year or look to next school year that they would like to mention? Please feel free to use the chat or unmute yourself.
Hi, Angie, April from North Cook. I don't have another form. You guys have done an amazing job putting it all the resources here together. I was wondering if I don't know, I hope it's received well, a recommendation maybe for moving ahead. When you share something in the copy form, you can't really see the document. So that's the one downfall, right? It forces a copy, but you can't see what you're looking at. And every time you click it, you're making another copy. I wonder if for our future links, if we want to just put it in view format, and that way no one can change it, but they can easily see it and then they can easily make their own copy. Do you know what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So that's
Sure.
just something to maybe think about, like for next year's documents when we're putting them together.
That's great feedback. Thank you, April. I know I have probably about 50 million copies of copies in my own
Right.
Google Drive.
Right.
So that's why, too, when we go through the slides, if you're going through, we also try to maybe provide a picture so you have a visual of what you're clicking into. But that's great feedback. Thank you.
Yeah, and anyone that's using the spreadsheet, if you made a copy of the Capacity Builder resource spreadsheet, it's easy to change that for yourself now because everyone's made their own copy. And all you do is when you click on that link, if you don't know that last word where it says copy, you just delete it and you can replace it with the word view. Okay, and then you don't just see the small thumbnail when you hover over it. When you open it up, it's a view format, and then you can go to file, copy to make a copy. But you can easily look to see if it's the right form, those kinds of things. You just have to be careful because a couple of them are Google Forms, and it doesn't quite work the same way if you make it a view. So just look, but anything that's a doc, you can turn it into a view for yourself.
Thank you. I see we have a comment in the chat asking if anybody is using the information and resources from school kits or the learning acceleration workshops. Anyone want to chime in on that before we talk about breadcrumbs? So I know most of us and the people that we work with out in the field are probably, for the most part, especially right now, just in complete survival mode. Teachers are really tired. We're really tired. And so I think if we're looking forward, the summer is going to be an opportune time to maybe re-inspire and re-engage some people in kind of a low threat manner. I think also certainly next fall, as teachers are returning to the classroom and their students are coming in, and everyone is refreshed and excited about being back together again, this would be a perfect time for us to start reintroducing these conversations if we haven't done so already. So hopefully throughout the course of the last several months, you've felt like we've kind of primed the pump for those conversations. And you have a bevy of resources at your disposal to have those. We want to transition right now. I'm going to kind of shrimp some of the conversations up that we've been having around the Illinois Priority Learning Standards, the blueprints, everything that we've been talking about. It was apparent after our conversation last time that maybe we just need a little bit of a refresher and common language around that. So I'm going to show you some things that for some of you is going to be a flashback to foundation level services. And for some of you, it might be a little new. So we're going to go ahead and spend a little bit of time together reviewing that evidence-centered design premise when it comes to math and English language arts. And we're doing that because we want you, this is probably the most complex piece of the Illinois Priority Learning Standards to wrap everybody's brains around and to really kind of think about, as April mentioned earlier, some of those 4 cogs. I thought that was really great to mention the fact that the IAR is really only one reason why you would prioritize or have conversations about these standards. really it's about defining, if we go back to those PLC questions, it's defining what it is we want all students to know and be able to do. So what's important to our educational communities, what's important for preparing students for the next grade level. So this is one piece of that pie, but it's a great kind of tangible springboard to launch ourselves off of. So we're going to take a few minutes just to kind of dig into those two content areas and share some additional resources that might help folks to better understand and apply what they're seeing in the ISB document. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen again. So I'm going to go ahead and, nope, I'm going to go ahead and leave my screen like this because we're going to be jumping to a few different tabs. So hopefully everybody can see this okay. Thumbs down, or go ahead and yell at me if you can't. Okay, I don't hear anyone. So
Angie, you're good. We can see it.
Thank you, Stacy. I can always count on Stacy for feedback. I appreciate that. So let's talk a minute about this idea of evidence-centered design. So I'm going to take us all the way back to the very beginning because it's a very good place to start. And if you recall, when we first started thinking about reconceptualizing our most summative assessment, which at the time was the PARCC assessment, we were introduced to this idea of evidence-centered design. And evidence-centered design is basically backwards design, starting with the standards and planning with that end in mind. So in evidence-centered design, we start with the standards, and the assessment developers took those standards and said, based on these standards, what claims should we be making about student learning and achievement? And from those claims, then they said, well, if we're going to be able to make these claims on student learning and student progress and student growth and achievement, we're going to need some evidence to support those claims, just like we would when we are working with our English language arts standards with our students, right? If you're going to make a claim about something, you have to have the evidence to support that. So based on these claims, what evidence will we need? And then based on that evidence, what tasks will we need to elicit the evidence that would support the claim that the students have mastered the standards? So when we're thinking about this idea of backwards design, it's very fluid, moving forward and back within the design to really kind of make sure that we have good checks and balances. So we're going to start off with exploring this and reminding ourselves what this looks like with regards to literacy, and then we'll move to math. So when we think about this structure, again, we have our claims, we have our evidence, and we have our tasks. So when we're thinking about the claims for English language arts, here are the claims that the Illinois Assessment of Readiness is measuring. So we have two major claims, one for reading complex text, and we have one for writing. Under each of those major claims, we also have subclaims. So under reading complex text, we have vocabulary, interpretation, and use. We have reading literature, and we have reading informational text. And under writing, we have written expression and conventions and knowledge of language. Cutting across all of those is this idea of research. So as we all well know, on the assessment, students are engaged in a research simulation task to elicit some evidence of this to be able to inform both of those major claims. I've gone ahead and I've hyperlinked actually this document if you would like to use it down here in the notes. And also it's hyperlinked on the graphic. Here's another place where we can find those claims. So if you remember, we have evidence tables. We talked about this a few months ago. The evidence tables for English language arts look like this. This is for reading. If you notice where the red arrow is, here is that reading literature claim. And we have reading literature standards here. We're going to talk about those in a minute. We can also find those claims on our score reports. So when students and teachers receive feedback, those are reported by claim and subclaim. So this should also look very familiar to some of you. But the claim is, again, that first point that we want to be able to report out on with regards to student performance and learning at that grade level. So our next step after understanding those claims is we're going to think about what evidence we would need in order to support those claims. So on our evidence tables, the right-hand side is the evidence statement. So here's the claim. Here are the standards that have been identified to support that claim. And here's the evidence from the standards that are going to really drive the development of assessment questions. I have told teachers when we first started this, I've been at the office now going on 12 years. And when we first started with our new Illinois learning standards, we did a lot of underlining and circling nouns and verbs. And I, with much kind of trepidation, got to share with them after these were developed that we really don't need to unpack the standards. These are the standards unpacked. So if we're looking at success criteria or learning targets or objectives, they're right here. This is important. You'll notice that each of these evidence statements are numbered. These will correspond to our reports that we took a look at with Ms. Dara a few months ago, and kind of looking how our students are performing in relation to each of those standards and claims. So you're going to notice here that the labeling, if you haven't looked at this before, is going to look a little bit different because we actually have our grade level, our standard number, and then we also have our evidence statement number, which correlates directly back to those evidence tables I just showed you. And then we have our tasks. So for each of those evidence statements that we just looked at, the developers of the assessment said, what questions, what tasks do we need to develop in order to inform those evidence statements, which therefore will inform our claims about students. And so here is that piece with the digital item library, where we can pull up questions that are directly correlated to those evidence statements and to those claims. So here is a third grade sample. And if you will remember, and if you joined us a few months ago, we did take a deep dive into this platform, but this is how this all kind of fits together and meshes very nicely in a very predictive kind of way. So let's kind of zoom back out and pull out and kind of think about how this relates to conversations related to our priority learning standards. We know that we have a blueprint for assessment. These blueprints for assessment were based on our claims, our evidence, and our tasks. And so we know that we need to have a large enough sample and a random enough sample to be able to collect data on those tasks to inform our evidence and our claims. And so we have a very basic kind of blueprint here, but in our Illinois Priority Learning Standards document, we're getting a little bit more information. So if we're looking here, I know some of you have commented, well, gosh, where's the vocabulary? The reason why these documents might look a little bit different is because they are arranged by claim and then also arranged by standard. So you have two different forms of the assessment and the number of points, but really here I like to look at the percentage. So if we do have districts who are concerned or have looked at their data and have said, gosh, our students historically have not performed well in these areas, this is a direct harken back to perhaps where our focus might need to lie with some of these standards in order to refocus some of our instruction or some of our intervention systems. So I have hyperlinked and noted what page we need to start looking at for English language arts. So in looking at some of these percentages and in relation to that claim structure, it might influence how some of our districts are responding to prioritizing their standards. You're going to notice again, vocabulary is paired. We always talked about, remember in a lot of our English language arts work, we talk about paired standards. So reading standard number 1 should be in everything that we do. Reading standard 1, 4, and then language standard number 4 usually all go together. So getting teachers to understand the kind of interrelationship of some of these standards is also very important in terms of prioritization. And those blueprint documents and those evidence tables can be really informative as far as helping them to connect all of those dots. One of the things that I like to do is go back to our evidence statement analysis reports and kind of look at, from a historical perspective, where are we above, our students performing above or below the trend line, and then tracing those back and looking at those specific questions on the digital item library to make sure that we are addressing that in our curriculum assessment and instruction at the appropriate rigor level. And Dara did a nice job several months ago of beginning to trace those breadcrumbs for us. And taking this back to the standards, we had a great conversation in our breakout group that tracing this back to the standards is important. Robert Kaplinski just had a blog out this morning that said that most of our teachers are accustomed to just aligning with their textbook resource. And oftentimes those textbooks are not at the appropriate rigor level. So we really need to drive them back to these documents to say, where is it that we need to be in order to appropriately prepare students, not only to be successful in that assessment, but to prepare them for that next grade level, or to have those big picture enduring understandings that will really benefit them from a K-12 perspective. Some of you did request some of those scope and sequence documents that I shared with you. These are not forced copy. So these are documents that I've used for 10 years in some of the districts that I've worked with. You can very easily substitute the quarters here for some of their units. If I were to go back and make adjustments to these now, one of the things that I would do is I would probably hyperlink in here some digital item questions so that they could just very easily go in and click. But it is arranged according to claim. And what's nice about this is that it helps to kind of align what they're doing in that claim structure. So that when they go back and look at that summative data, they have kind of that mindset and that frame of reference to bounce back and forth between what they're seeing locally and what they're doing locally and that most summative assessment, because we know that that should be a predictive system. So I'm going to close this out. I'm going to stop sharing for a second before we hop into math. Anything that anyone has questions on or would like to comment on? Was everybody having foundation level services flashbacks? It's making a comeback. Thank you, Laura.
Angie, I love those documents for reading. Again, I think one of the biggest issues that people are having with priority is figuring out what to do with writing. That seems to be their big stickler. So any suggestions that anybody has with regard to that will be so beneficial.
Mm-hmm. Anyone want to comment on that right now about that writing component?
I just wanted to say that I agree with everyone about the writing, and I think Angie already alluded to this, that the Achieve the Core writing resources are really a great place, I think, to start. But I think that we need to remember that if the priority standards are set up so that writing is in two places, it's writing expression as well as the writing conventions, which is really kind of this focus of, writing serves more than just a writing grade. It can also encompass the language and all of those pieces. And that, I think, is what is so hard for teachers, just from my experience in my area, they still see writing as something separate. Right, it's writing time. And writing time is really a way for us to check comprehension, which is the number, as well as to teach them so many of the language standards. And that in itself is a beast, because reading time, writing time, grammar time, right?
And I agree. And Dara, what a great reflection, because I feel like a lot of our teachers are saying, we don't have time, we don't have time. And really it's about being smarter about their prioritization and use of time rather than doing 500 disconnected things. And so remember, we several years ago talked a lot about this idea of writing to learn and then writing to communicate our findings. And so if we can kind of get them into that mindset, that writing is just kind of integrated into that process, and what a great way to include vocabulary and those conventions pieces as part of the writing and drafting process. Incidentally, I also work with transitional English language arts, and from the post-secondary level, that's one of the biggest criticisms, I think, as far as our students matriculating. They don't have that persistence with their writing to go back and draft and redraft, to receive and apply feedback. And so, the more that we can do with that writing process and that drafting and rewriting process as part of a writing to learn and writing to communicate, I think that would be really high leverage for our students.
Angie, I also like to add that I think you mentioned earlier about not getting to the textbooks, not getting to the rigor, but I think also I agree with that. But I think also a lot of the assessments don't get to the rigor. And I think the way to do it is through writing, because if you want to get to that DOK3 or even DOK4s, there has to be some writing involved. A lot of the assessments I've seen have like just little short answers or multiple choice, and they're getting to the DOK1s and 2s. But if you want to get to the kind of rigor that's expected in some of these, high leverage assessments, they need to include the writing in their assessments.
Mm-hmm. One of the exercises, if you haven't done this, is pulling some of those annotated samples from the released items and then just going through with the rubric and asking first. I always have teachers evaluate it first, and usually they're like, oh, wow. And then you give them the annotations from the released items, and they very quickly realize that students are held to a much higher standard than perhaps even what they had conceptualized. So that's a great low risk activity to really kind of get at what is our focus and where should we be at with our writing conversations and implementation. All right, we are going to take a peek now at math. Math is a little bit more complicated. I'm just going to reiterate what we shared earlier, in that there are so many wonderful math resources that have developed as far as kind of our tenure in the state of Illinois. With we had the Illinois Model Math Curriculum, we had the Illinois Teach and Talk Teach and Learn website for math. So there's a lot of great resources out there to support math, but the claim structure with this is a little bit more involved. So if you haven't looked at those math claims, I just kind of like to walk you through some of these to kind of increase our understanding here. So the math claim structure also has a master claim, which is students will be on track for college and career readiness in math. And then we have 4 subclaims here. Subclaim A deals with major content of that grade level. Those are our green standards. So when Park released their model content frameworks, there were some standards that were coded as green. So I always like to tell teachers, if you have to pick a hill to die on, make it a green one. So subclaim A is our major content. Subclaim B is all about additional and supporting content. So those are our blues and our yellows. Remember, yellows are additional, and we were seeing that a lot of those were falling at the end of our scope and sequence for math. Our blues should be taught through something. So they are not to be necessarily, you get higher leverage when you teach them with something else. Okay, so relating time and partitioning shape to fractions per se. Okay. Subclaim C has to do with our mathematical reasoning, really kind of focusing on those standards of mathematical practice. And then subclaim D has to do with modeling. So it's always very interesting, an interesting exercise to pull questions from that digital item library and asking teachers, which subclaim do you think is being addressed here? So our claims are also included on the students' score reports and can be disaggregated. So that is something to be aware of. With our evidence, the evidence tables for math are not as pretty or as clean as they are for English language arts. So if we take a look at our math evidence structure, and I'm going to talk about the types of tasks here in a minute, these are those tables. Okay, so on the left-hand side, it's going to tell you which subclaim. So this one has to do with major content. You're going to look at this and say 3 INT2. Well, that's not a standard. That's because it's integrated. And I'll share more about that in just a moment. But you'll notice that 3 OA8, 3 NBT2, and 3 NBT3 are all informing this particular evidence statement key. And what I love about the one thing that I do find very useful about this document is that we are making a connection to those standards of mathematical practice, and we are finding out a little bit more about the types of tasks that students are going to be engaged in their participation in the assessment. And so we can kind of go back and be self-reflective about our assessments and our instruction and see if we are meeting those bumpers. We're also going to see down here at the bottom, these are all of those evidence statements on our evidence statement analysis report. And so again, you're going to see things like 3C51. Well, there isn't a standard with the code of C. That just means that it's a subclaim. It's subclaim C. INT is integrated. Okay, so you might need to do some pre-work and teaching with teachers when we are looking at our Illinois Priority Learning Standards and we're looking at some of those reports. I did mention to you that some of our tasks are going to look a little bit different. And so we need to be also educating our teachers that the tasks that they're going to be seeing to inform those evidence statements. Some are going to be focused on skills, concepts, and procedures. Some are going to be focused on mathematical reasoning, and some are going to be focused in on those modeling and application pieces. And so do we see this reflected in their own curriculum assessment and instruction? So this is directly pulled. This is what it looks like in our Illinois Priority Learning Standards document. So I pulled third grade just because I wanted to maintain consistency. But again, what we're going to be looking at here and what's ripe for conversation is the domain percentage. And so I pulled here fourth grade because I love fourth grade. For fourth grade, there are certain grade levels that are really kind of turning points with various domains. And so if we scroll down, we see that we have numbers fractions. For those of you who are not engaged in the math conversations, fractions are a huge part of fourth grade. They're also 19% of that assessment. So this is an area for conversation. Are they prioritizing and taking their time with that fraction piece? We also have operations and algebraic thinking that's playing a huge role. A lot of teachers don't address the measurement and data, but we can talk about the fact that 12 to 13% of their assessment questions are going to be focused on measurement and data, and oftentimes they're paired with another standard. Here we see that integrated piece. Geometry is only 2 to 6%. So are we finding that same balance locally? How does that affect our conversations with regards to prioritization? And then I think probably the most overlooked area, we have subclaim C here with our reasoning, and we have also subclaim D here, which is 23%, which is our modeling. How are we weaving in the modeling and the reasoning into our curriculum assessment and instruction? So in looking at this, just by looking at the standards, we might miss these conversations with relation to application, with regards to reasoning, with regards to modeling. And so by looking at this, even though it is a little bit foreign perhaps to some of our teachers, it does do a nice job of sparking some of those conversations about how we're doing that. Are we making time? Oftentimes the reasoning and the modeling takes the most time, and it's most frequently skipped. So we do want to make sure that in conversations with regards to prioritization, that we are not overlooking those essential components to build math understanding. Because really that is what, to April's point earlier, that's what's going to build that endurance, and it's going to best prepare them for not only the next grade level, but oftentimes we know with math, it's not so linear. So oftentimes we're working on developing a concept that they're really going to dig deeper into, perhaps even at the junior high or the high school level. So looking at how, for example, partitioning shapes, they need to know that so that they can start to conceptualize fractions, which will then kind of lead to a better understandings of ratio and proportional relationships. So taking the time with that is important. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I know math was a little bit different. What questions do you have about math as we start to draw our time together this morning to a close? If you would like more math resources, I would like to remind everybody that the Model Math curriculum did a great job of kind of identifying and outlining some of those pieces. And don't forget your digital item library to really kind of show teachers what this should look like in practice. All right, I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Dara.
Wait, does I see in the chat box, does it have a Form A and Form B for math, or is it just one form for math? I know in ELA there was two. This is Garrett from South Cook. You did a great job explaining, Angie. You always make it very clear. I love it. But there was a question in the chat box from Chrissy.
Okay.
What do you mean by a Form A and a Form B? That's what I'm confused on.
Okay, so my question is for the ELA, there's two different forms of assessment, Form A or Form B, where on the writing, they have two different writing tasks depending on if it's Form A or Form B. And so when I was looking, I'm not as familiar with math, and so I'm trying to get my mind wrapped around the math documents as well. And so I noticed that on the priority learning standards, it has the percentages next to the Form A and the Form B. So my clarification question is, for math, is there just one form for the assessment?
I'm going to defer to Angelique on that because I didn't see any other reference to different form types. I don't know if any of that's changed.
I'm looking it up right now on the New Meridian site. I know in the past, as a former middle school math teacher, we did have different forms, but I don't know if that's true any longer. So I am going to look that up from New Meridian on the site to see if I can find it before we close here in the next 4 minutes. And if we don't, I will let you know for sure. I'll pass it on to Angie or any of our great presenters here who can get back in touch with you.
Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, as we come to a close here, we just want to remind you of a few things as we wrap it all up. Just 1 second. I'm sorry. I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen? Okay, so we have a couple more sessions coming up. Our next one for this year is June 21st, and during that meeting, we'll be continuing to focus on assessments and unfinished learning. It will be a continuation of what you kind of was introduced to today. And then we will meet again July 19th, so we encourage everyone to save those dates. We believe that part of this capacity building is giving us chances to network. And so while these meetings are a great time for us to present new information, we also enjoy hearing from everyone else. That next session will be at 10 a.m. and you'll be getting an invite for that. With that, I believe that is all that we have for today. We appreciate everyone taking the time to meet, and we look forward to seeing you again next month. Have a great day.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Thanks, Garrett. Good to see you.
Good to see you also.
Well done, everyone.
Great job. Great job. Who needs our assessment department when we have you guys? Awesome. Thank you so much.
I think that just keep moving. I think we've got them.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of information today, partially the breakout room. The majority of people, I'm guessing, Angie, how many were in your group? Do you know? I had 5. There was 0 and 3. Maggie, how?
There
Maybe 8
were
or 9.
probably about 9 or 10 in 2.
So that's great to know. Most of them have given the needs assessment because that's Maggie's room, and preparing PD, that's Angie's room, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that was good.
Yeah, mine was capacity
Building. So the needs assessment was, I'm sorry,
guess
didn't have any.
Yeah, my guess is they've already done it,
Mm-hmm.
or they got to figure out what their role looks like before they can go do it.
Right. Yeah. That was good information though.
Mm-hmm.
So are we, Angelique, how's this going to work with our next, oh, Erica's back. Okay. With our next, welcome back, with our next planning meeting. Did we want to set a time now or?
Yeah, let's go ahead and do that.
Okay.
So I'd like to go ahead and set 2 planning meetings, one for our June session and then one for like transition